the hell up, earning $500 million at the box office, and it's the start of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which becomes the highest grossing movie franchise of all time, making the decision to cast Robert Downey Jr., one of the greatest and most lucrative casting decisions in movie history. So this relatively unknown actor is rich now. He just took in over $690 million, and he did it basically by just using his charming personality. So how did he get so rich? Now the guy's name is Zach, and Zach's an aspiring actor, and he really wants to be famous. But unfortunately for him, he's not. But he will be. But for now, he's just a guy who runs a juice bar in Chicago. But then one day, he writes a billionaire asking him to invest in his juice bar. That billionaire is Howard Schultz, the CEO of Starbucks. So Zach writes Howard asking him to invest, thinking, I don't know, it's worth a shot. But then, surprisingly, Howard Schultz writes him back. And he says that he's really impressed with the business plan that Zach pitched him, but that he doesn't want to invest in the juice bar. However, he does want to invest in Zach. He wants him to come work for him at his venture capital firm in Los Angeles. So then Zach goes to his girlfriend, this woman, Mallory, and he shows her this email from Howard. And they're all excited, and just like that, boom, they move to Los Angeles so he can take this new job waiting for him at this venture capital firm. Here's the messed up thing though. There is no new job waiting for him at this venture capital firm. Zach never got a job offer from billionaire Howard Schultz because Howard Schultz never wrote him back. Zach made all of that up. He faked the email and everything. And he tells this big lie so that he can convince Mallory to drop everything and move to Los Angeles with him. Because remember, deep down, he's an aspiring actor who really wants to be famous. Why he doesn't just tell his girlfriend that, I don't know. So anyway, pow, they're now in LA. And Zach has got to keep this lie going. So several times a week, he'll leave his apartment for hours at a time. And he tells Mallory, oh, I'm off to work, I've got an important meeting. But he's really going over to this acting school to secretly take acting classes. And he's going on auditions, and he's putting himself on tape. But as it turns out, landing a role is hard for him. Mostly because his acting sucks.
I am completely and utterly in love with you.
Now, despite that, Zach does have a couple of things going for him. Like he's charming and he's driven, and at some point, over dinner, he meets these two, Julio and Diego. And Julio and Diego are brothers, and they're also indie filmmakers. Like, they mostly make short films. And they really hit it off with Zach, and they become friends. And Zach, he eventually tells them the same lie he told Mallory. Hey, I got this connection to billionaire Howard Schultz, and I can get him to invest in your movies. So the three of them start a production company, and they end up buying the rights to low-budget English language movies and distributing them in Latin American countries. And this is a legit business model, but they need capital to get it going. So Zach hits up an old college buddy of his who works in investing, a buddy we'll call Day Trader Jake. And so Zach convinces Day Trader Jake to invest $37,000 into his new movie distribution business, promising him, hey, Howard Schultz invested in my company, and you'll make a quick return. He even shows him fake licensing agreements from Sony, ones he just typed up in Microsoft Word. So Day Trader Jake agrees to invest. Agreements from Sony, ones he just typed up in Microsoft Word. So Day Trader Jake agrees to invest $37,000. And within a few months, Zach actually does pay him back with interest. So then Day Trader Jake tells his other investor friends, hey, invest in Zach's movie company. He'll pay you back quick with interest. So then all of those friends start investing, partly based on the lie that Howard Schultz is involved, and partly based on the fact that Zach forged even more fake licensing agreements from Netflix and HBO. Ones that he, again, just typed up on Microsoft Word. Now, in order to pay all these new investors back, Zach turns his business into a straight-up Ponzi scheme. He starts taking money from the new investors and using it to pay back the old investors. But here's the thing though, this works really well for him because for now, all of these investors are getting paid back with interest. And so then more people hear about what he's doing and they invest in the company. And then even more people interest. And so then more people hear about what he's doing, and they invest in the company. And then even more people hear about it, and then they start investing. And it starts with like tens of thousands of dollars, and soon people are investing millions of dollars at a time into his movie distribution company because they all appear to be making a return. Now, at this point in the story, Zach is barely distributing movies at all, because the real money's in the Ponzi scheme he's doing. And of course, he's paying himself during all of this too. Millions of dollars. Meanwhile, his girlfriend Mallory has no idea he's scamming. She's thinking, wow, his movie business is doing really well. I'm so grateful for Howard Schultz. And so Mallory marries him, thinking he's this incredible businessman. And suddenly, they're both living this baller-ass lifestyle. Driving a new Mercedes, driving a new Audi, constantly hitting up Las Vegas casinos and spending tens of thousands of dollars at a time. They go and buy a $5.7 million house. Like, look at this. It's got a pool with a hot tub, a gym, a wine cellar, a theater, and look at this f***ing closet. Look at it! And not only that, with all this newfound money, Zach is finally able to finance movie projects that he can act in. Because remember, his goal is still to be an actor and to be famous. So then bam, he gets some acting roles in some small movies. One of them is actually this Joker fan film, which they produced and put on YouTube, where Zach actually plays the Joker.
Sorry, I couldn't quite catch that.
And yeah, he's still not that great of an actor, but at least his Ponzi scheme is going well. Until, at this point, Zach's been running this scam for over 5 years, and he's managing the money of over 250 investors, and he's taken over $690 million worth of investments. Some of it he's paid back, but here's where it all starts to fall apart. Every Ponzi scheme is destined to fail, because at some point you run out of new investors to pay back the old investors. And so suddenly, kaboom! One day, Zach isn't able to deliver on a round of payments. So his old investors are like, yo, Zach, where's my money at? And so then Zach does what he does best. He turns on his charm and he starts bullshitting everyone, telling them all kinds of excuses. Oh, HBO is reorganizing, or oh, Netflix is in the middle of an audit, so the streaming services are late paying me. So to buy some time, he types up these fake emails that are supposed to be from execs at HBO and Netflix. And these emails have HBO and Netflix apologizing for the late payments and that they'll get the payments out soon. And he shows these fake emails to the investors, and they believe him, and it satisfies everyone for a while. Then another year goes by, and Zach still hasn't paid his investors back. And at this point, all the investors are fed up and they're tired of the excuses. And some of them, they go and they file a lawsuit against Zach and his company. So then the lawyers involved have to subpoena Netflix for their financial records because Zach told them that this was all Netflix's fault. And they're like, hey, Zach says you owe him money and therefore he can't pay us. And Netflix is like, we have no record of ever doing business with this Zach guy or his company. And so the lawyers write back and they're like, what about all these licensing agreements you signed? And then they send Netflix the fake licensing agreements that Zach had given them that he typed up in Microsoft Word, along with all of the fake emails that Zach had fabricated. And Netflix looks at it and they're like, these are fraudulent, and this is a huge deal. And that is when everyone involved starts to piece all of this together, and they come to the conclusion that Zach is running a Ponzi scheme. And of course, everyone is pissed off and they're disgusted and they want to take Zach down. But no one is more pissed off and disgusted than his old college buddy, day trader Jake. Because Jake was the very first investor. And he feels bad because he's the one who got all of those other investors involved. So he has to go and contact all of those other investors and shamefully tell them he may have accidentally involved all of them in a con. And by sheer coincidence, I'm sure, it's right around that time that old Zach hits him up. And he sends him an email and he asks him for even more money. But at this point, day trader Jake has had enough and he contacts the FBI. And so then, boom, the FBI raids Zach's house and they arrest Zach, and I don't have a mugshot, but he's an actor, so I do have a headshot. So here's his headshot. And allegedly, the same day he got arrested, his wife Mallory files for divorce. Good for her. Meanwhile, Zach takes a plea deal and he gets sentenced to 20 years in prison for this Ponzi scheme. Plus, he has to pay back $230 million in restitution to all the people he defrauded. But on the bright side, I guess he is sort of famous now. You remember the Austin Powers movies? Well, one of the actors is now in prison for life. And it all starts with this 19-year-old woman. And we don't know her name, so we'll just call her Shelley. And one night, it's Christmas Eve in 1990, and Shelley is driving home from a night out. And once she arrives, she gets out of her car, and then a strange man approaches her, and he asks her for directions. And before Shelley can really answer, boom, the man pulls out a pew-pew. And then another man comes out of the shadows, and pow, they grab her, and both of them start beating her up. And then bam, they knock her unconscious. And then they pick her up, and they throw her into the back of a van they're driving that's parked nearby, and the van speeds away. And for the next few hours, the men do horrible things to Shelley in the back of that van. And I won't get into details, but it's a lot of SA and torture. And when they're done, they kick her out of the van and they flee, disappearing into the night. And Shelley reports them to the police, and they get some composite sketches of the men, but that's all they can do. I mean, the men got away, and poor Shelley is left feeling absolutely hopeless. And 4 years go by, and the men still haven't been identified or caught. Now, one of those guys, his name is Joe-san. And Joe-san's 20 years old, and he's clearly a violent guy. So around this time, he starts a career in MMA. Like, he works out, and he trains, and he goes to tournaments, and he actually competes.
Hi, my name's Joe-san. I'm from Huntington Beach, California. The Lord said, not by my might or my strength, but with my spirit.
And interestingly enough, his whole gimmick is that he's this big Christian martial artist.
You guys will see the spirit of the Lord of Jesus Christ tonight.
And he's like very theatrical about it, like he walks out to the ring carrying a big ass cross on his back. Like, it's very over the top. Anyway, I actually have some footage of a professional fight that he competed in, and you can see him right here. He's obviously the guy in red getting tossed around. And after about 2 minutes and 45 seconds, the other guy gets him down, chokes him out, and you can see him right here tapping out. But I guess Jesus isn't with him that night, because he loses that fight. But anyway, around this time, I guess he decides that he really likes the spotlight, because that is when he gets into acting. Like, he goes out and he works hard and he auditions, and he eventually lands a small role in an episode of a TV show called Reasonable Doubts. Pretty cool. And right after that, he lands a role in a B movie starring Dolph Lundgren.
He's a driver, not a killer. I'm different.
Then he lands a role in another movie called Shoot Fighter starring William Zabka. Then he gets a role in Blood Fist Part 5. And I have no idea what these movies are, but like, he's in them. And for whatever reason, I don't know if it's just a coincidence, but in every single movie he's cast in, he's the villain. Maybe it's just like the way he looks, maybe it's because he's a bad guy in real life. I don't know. But whatever, the acting thing seems to be working out for him. Because after that, he gets another role, and then another role, and then another one. But then, one day, he gets a really big break. He auditions for a new big budget comedy, a movie starring Mike Myers called Austin Powers, and he plays the part of Dr. Evil's henchman, Random Task.
Oh, that really hurt. I'm gonna have a lump there, you idiot. Who throws a shoe? Honestly.
And it's not a lead role, but this is a huge deal for him. But all that spotlight and exposure for an actor, you would think that things would take off for him, but for some reason, they really don't. Like, maybe he quit, maybe he just didn't get cast in anything else, I don't know. But he actually has no more film or TV credits after that. Regardless, he's still not ready to... He actually has no more film or TV credits after that. Regardless, he's still not ready to give up the spotlight, because a few years later, he returns to MMA fighting. And he gets back in the ring, and he loses. And then he loses again, and then he loses again. And ultimately, he ends his professional MMA career with a record of 0-4. Womp womp. And then about 6 years go by, and apparently Joe still has some of that fighter left in him. Because one night, and we don't know what the details are, but he gets into it with his roommate, because I guess he has a roommate. And Joe-san ends up getting so mad at the roommate that he walks up to the roommate's car, and then boom, boom, he straight up kicks the car door in. And of course, can't be doing that, that's frowned upon. And he gets reported to the police, and so bam, they arrest him. Here's the thing though. Joe-san ends up taking a plea deal, and he spends a few months in jail for felony vandalism. But whatever, he'll serve his time and he'll get out and he'll go back to his normal life, like, you know, no big deal. Until... So Joe-san took a plea deal, right? And as part of his plea deal, the state requires him to submit a DNA sample, which Joe-san has never done before. And so police, they take his DNA sample, and it's routine that they run the sample through their database. So they run their sample through the database, and holy shit, it comes back as a match to a really old cold case from Christmas Eve, 1990. See, all those years ago, Joe-san and the other guy kidnapped Shelly, and they did horrible things to her in the back of that van, but they didn't unalive her. They let her go. And so, of course, Shelly reported it to the police, and they came up with some composite sketches, but they're also able to collect some DNA samples, which was a fairly new technology at that time. And police added those DNA samples to their database, but at the time, they had no one to match the DNA to. And so those samples sat in their database for almost 20 years, until there's suddenly a match for Joe-san. And so, bam, police arrest him. Here's his mugshot.
An incarcerated actor who's probably best known for his role in the movie Austin Powers was in front of a judge once again today.
And so police question him, and Joe-san, he denies doing anything wrong, but he's certainly happy to tell them all about his acting.
And you said that you were an actor. What do you do acting?
I do comedy, play bad guys sometimes. Did you see Austin Powers?
Uh-huh.
I played a little role in part 1.
Okay.
You can find me on Wikipedia, believe it or not.
And he actually legitimately does have a Wikipedia page, by the way. Anyway, so police have Joe-san, but he isn't admitting to anything. He doesn't care what DNA evidence they have, he ain't talking. And so police are like, all right, we'll just find your accomplice. Because remember, there were 2 men that attacked Shelly that night. And so now that they have Joe-san in custody, they start looking at his social circle, his old friends, his friends of friends, and they end up finding a guy who looks somewhat like an older version of the composite drawing they got from back in the day. And that guy is this guy, Santiago. And so they bring Santiago in and they question him, and he doesn't admit to anything either. But then they get a DNA sample from him too. And of course, his DNA matches the DNA they collected from the crime scene back in 1990. And so, boom, they arrest him. Here's his mugshot. And Santiago eventually caves and he ends up confessing to the crime, which then really screws Joe-san over because it implicates him as well. Regardless, Joe-san is found guilty and he's sentenced to prison time, and while he's in prison, he ends up unaliving his cellmate. And so they sentence him to more time. So now he's serving 34 years to life, while Santiago gets 17 years in prison. And after having waited almost 20 years, and while he's in prison, he ends up unaliving his cellmate. And so they sentence him to more time. So now he's serving 34 years to life, while Santiago gets 17 years in prison. And after having waited almost 20 years to find these guys, Shelly finally gets the justice she deserves. Good for her. And a huge shout out to Leonardo.ai for